Thank God. Hello. Okay, so we are making progress with the recording. At least that much we know. Okay. Ezekiel chapter 41, using the Art Scroll Milstein edition as the basic curriculum. We also have some the Art Scroll Tanakh series as color commentary if necessary. And if you have try to have a Tanakh handy just in case we go into some other verses. Otherwise, Chabad.org has a nice edition, it's from the Judaica Press edition of Tanakh. It's available free of charge with Rashi. Okay. Very good. Okay, can we have a volunteer translator? Volunteer translator. So if you're trying to volunteer, please unmute your mic.
I'll volunteer, Rabbi.
That was Teresa?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so now the sanctuary is the inner building in the temple. Let's get a photo of the temple again. So the more narrow but fancy inner building, like in this picture, that is the sanctuary. The front is the regular sanctuary. The back is the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So now, in Hebrew, sanctuary is the word Kodesh, holy. So in Hebrew, it fits more organically. There's the Kodesh, and then there's Kodesh HaKadoshim, the top Kodesh. So yeah, we see that with English and many languages. Other languages outside of the original language that God gave the prophecy with can complicate things. In Hebrew, Kodesh HaKadoshim, it's a very logical transition. But in English, sanctuary and the Holy of Holies, that sounds like it'd be in two different parts of the building, not sequential. And page 339 here in the Milstein edition. See. So here's the gateway, the sanctuary, then the Holy of Holies with the Holy Ark. Only the Kohen entered once a week there.
Once a year. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm just glad to be with you, Abba.
Oh, very good.
Family time.
Very good.
And best of all,
And God, we're learning Hashem Torah.
Uncle and Aunt time.
Oh, that's good too.
Uncle and Aunt time. With father and son. Just saying, I'm not your dad, Abba. I'm
Okay.
your son.
So now, just to show the diagram of the third temple, remember the third temple is much bigger than the previous temples. So this is on page 318 of the Milstein edition. Okay, so the entire building of the Kodesh, of the Kodesh and Kodesh HaKadoshim is here. It looks like a very like almost a small portion of the entirety of the third temple. So that shows you just how big the third temple is. So whereas it was obvious when people came to the temple in previous iterations of the temple, in the third temple it's going to be more like a secluded room that you have to build your way up to, like going to see a king. And remember the verse that God will be king upon all the land. So it's appropriate to, approach the king with more decorum and greater respect, etc., etc. I'll be reading starting the Hebrew in chapter 41. Third line from the bottom of the Hebrew text in page 338 in the Milstein. Vayivi'eni el ha'hekal, vayamad es ha'elim shesh amos rochav, mipo v'shesh amos rochav, mipo rochav ha'ohel. Rochav ha'pesach, eser amos, v'chisfos ha'pesach, chamesh amos mipo, v'chamesh amos mipo, v'amad arko arboim amo, v'rochav esrim amo. Okay, please translate the first two verses, Teresa.
Then he brought me to the sanctuary. He measured the side walls of the entrance as 6 cubits high on the one side and 6 cubits wide on the other, the width of the tent. The width of the entrance was 10 cubits, and the walls on the shoulders of the entrance were 5 cubits on the one side and 5 cubits on the other. He measured its length as 40 cubits, and it was 20 cubits wide.
Thank you. Okay, so a cubit again is between 18 inches and 24 inches, depending. Well, I suppose it's going to be decided when after Mashiach comes. If the temple is prefab or fabricated and it's waiting in heaven, as per the opinion of the Chavetz Chaim, so then we simply have to measure the temple and see. Okay, so this part here is 20 cubits. So that means we divide this by 20, and that's the length of a cubit. You understand? If, however, the temple is not already built, so then there may have to be a decree of the Sanhedrin or a declaration by Elijah, the prophet, about the exact length of a cubit.
That's it.
We find this similarly that in the Chumash, Moses wrote down the size of an ephah. So that is actually a verse in the Torah. So it's necessary so that we can determine this and then build everything around that. So you see, so that means it could be potentially one quarter bigger than people may be already designing a third temple for, or it could be a quarter smaller. Okay, now Debbie, if you had any pressing questions, maybe codify.
Well, you had said once a week that he'd go into the Kadosh Kadashim. And I just wanted to clarify for everybody, it's once a year.
Right, exactly. Once a year, only on Yom Kippur.
Right. And get some honey and lemon for that cough.
Well, I wasn't trying to buy it any gifts or nothing. And
Gifts for the poor,
Yeah.
gifts for the poor, everybody line up.
it was
gifts
such
for
a
you.
nice cough. I thought I would just make some honey and lemon for it, and buy a little chocolate cake as well. Maybe at least a cupcake.
Please
with
don't kill yourself if you die.
that
You
makes
do
sense.
better without the sugar.
Okay, yeah, as well. Okay, going to verse 3 in the Hebrew, page 340 in the Milstein. Uva lifanima, vayamad el hapesach shtayim amos, vapesach shesh amos, v'rochav hapesach sheva amos. Vayamad es arko esrim ama, v'rochav esrim ama, al panei ha'hechal. Vayomer Eli zek kodesh hakodashim. Okay, please translate 3 and 4.
Then he entered the inner sanctum. He measured the side walls of the entrance as 2 cubits wide. The entrance was 6 cubits in height, and the width of the entrance was 7 cubits. He measured its length as 20 cubits, and its width as 20 cubits along the sanctuary. He said to me, "This is the Holy of Holies."
Okay, so when we say measure the side walls of the entrance, we're talking about the thickness of the wall. That's why we're discussing that it was how high and wide it was. Again, this is talking about the actual entryway, the doorway. So the doorway was big enough. Even if you have a 7-foot kohen, he could still do the service. Whereas discussing the thickness of the entrance, so that potentially could be a problem if indeed a cubit is 18 inches. So then you're talking about a 36-inch wide width. So if that was the door, so that could be a problem for a bigger kohanim. But we're talking about the thickness of the walls, not the entryway. Verse 5. V'yamad kir habayis sheish amos v'rochav hatzela arba amos saviv labayis saviv batzlaos tzela el tzela shaloshim pamim uvaos bakir asher labayis batzlaos saviv lihios achuzim v'lo yihiu achuzim bikir habayis v'rachava v'nasva lamala Latzlos ki musav habayis lamala saviv labayis alkin rochav labayis lamala v'chein hatachtona yala al ha'elyona batichona. Okay, please translate through verse 7, 5, 6, and 7.
Then he measured the thickness of the wall of the temple as 6 cubits. The width of each cell was 4 cubits, surrounding the temple all around. The cells were arranged cell upon cell, 33 in number. They rested upon the inner wall of the cells all around and were anchored there, but they were not anchored into the wall of the temple building. The cells became broader, and there was a spiral staircase for the levels of cells proceeding upward, for the temple was surrounded by successive levels all around the level structure. Thus, the widest part of the cell structure was at the top level, and thus one would ascend from the lowest to the highest through the middle cells.
Yeah, because of the repetition of the word wall, therefore I'm just going to say it's probably obvious to everyone, but I want to make sure everyone understands. So there are 2 main walls: the outer wall, the outer gate wall, and the inner wall of the Kodesh and Kodesh HaKodashim. So this is the inner wall I'm talking about. Okay. So now, but what about the thickness of the wall by the entrance? Okay. How thick was the wall by the entrance? So we know the wall itself is 6 cubits. But in the previous verses, we saw that it was
5.
it was 2 cubits, right? When he entered, the like the side lintels as on each side of the doorway was thick, a thickness of 2 cubits. So imagine like a place you would put a mezuzah, on the doorpost. So the doorpost itself was only, a couple cubits wide. Even though the rest of the structure and the walls of the Kodesh and Kodesh HaKadoshim of the sanctuary was 6 cubits in width. Okay. All right. So, and we see the indentation in the picture. So the inner the initial 2 cubits that we discussed previously earlier in the chapter, that's within the indentation. How wide is this little part there that we put a mezuzah on potentially?
May I ask a question?
Yes.
I hope it's not ignorant. What are the purpose of the cells?
Okay, so that is a very good question. I think I forgot to discuss that last week. So we'll get to that question today, hopefully.
Okay.
It's a very good question. Okay. So all right. So the now then in verse 5, it says he measured the thickness of the wall of the temple. But there's 2 main walls of the temple, right? However, as far as like imagining we are with Ezekiel as he's like spiritually floating through the temple or something. So therefore it's all continuous from his perspective as a spirit going through the temple. So therefore we must be, logically speaking, about the sanctums, the Kadish's walls, not the outer walls of the temple. And in fact, Art School mentions this here in the Milton edition. If you look in verse 5, then he measured the thickness of the wall of the temple. This is the western wall of the Holy of Holies. Again, the Holy of Holies is physically connected to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, connected to the Kodesh. And this is a separate structure from the outer walls.
Could I ask a second question?
Yes, you can.
It says in the commentary, they rested upon the inner wall and were anchored there, but they were not anchored.
Can you tell us which verse you're quoting from?
I'm reading at the bottom of page 342 under they rested upon the inner wall and were anchored there, but they were not anchored.
Okay, that's the verse we didn't read yet. So
Oh, I'm so sorry. I did.
you see, there's a reason why it's harder to understand than the verse we just read.
It's part of verse 6, I think.
Right, exactly. The very next verse we're getting to. So that's amazing.
I thought she read 5 through 7.
No, now it's possible that Linda just read that, or maybe she had some sort of either a psychic or a prophetic vision of.
I thought she just read 5 through 7.
Oh no, she read 3 through 5.
Oh, sorry.
No, so I mean, it's okay if a prophecy somehow comes to you, feel free to share. Otherwise, I'm assuming you just read ahead.
No. Like I said, I'm sorry.
No problem. Okay. Let's all catch up to Linda. Okay. Okay. So right now, Linda is the most knowledgeable person in the class. We got to catch up to her. She knows she is the secret information of the next two verses. Okay. All right. So verses 6 and 7 in the Hebrew. Here we go. Batsalos Sela el Sela Shalosh Shaloshim Palmim Uvaos Bakira Asher Labayis Batsalos Saviv Saviv Lihios Achuzim V'lo Yihu Achuzim Bekir Habayis Rachava Nasva Lamala Lamala Batsalos Ki Musav Habayis Lamala Lamala Saviv Saviv Labayis Alkin Ro Chav Labayis Lamala V'chen Hatachtona Yala El Ha'Elyona Latichona. Okay, Teresa, please translate 5 and sorry, 6 and 7.
6 and 7. Excuse me. The cells were arranged cell upon cell, 33 in number. They rested upon the inner wall of the cells all around and were anchored there, but they were not anchored into the wall of the temple building. The cells became borders, and there was a spiral staircase for the levels of cells proceeding upward, for the temple was surrounded by successive levels all around the cell structure. Thus, the widest part of the cell structure was at the top level, and thus one would ascend through the lowest to the highest through the middle cells.
Okay, so so implicitly, one would ascend lowest to highest to the middle, means that these were passageways, not just indentations in the wall. So it wasn't just an alcove; it was a place where people could physically enter. So I guess that's why they're using the phrase cell. But maybe I would have gone with alcove instead of cell, because cell sounds a little bit it has a potentially negative connotation in English, even though cell is technically more accurate. Still, we're talking about God's holy temple. We shouldn't have any negative connotations. Okay, so now the cells we're talking about here is different from the cells we were talking about last week. The cells we were talking about last week, okay, here is Testing 1, 2, 3, testing. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Yep.
Testing 1, 2, 3, testing. Can you hear me?
yes,
Yep.
Testing 1, 2, 3, testing. Can you hear me?
yes, sir.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
It sounds like he can't hear us.
That's what I'm thinking.
Me too. I'm thinking the same thing, Natanya.
Testing 1, 2, 3, testing.
We can hear
We
You
you.
hear me?
Rabbi.
Okay, so now let me confirm my speaker is working. That is strange. Okay, so before there was no indication whatsoever why my sound was not working. But now there is an indication that my audio is not working, so I cannot hear you. So we may
Right.
have to.
Cancel for the night.
You can't hear us now?
No. Well, let's just try this. I think I should reboot my computer. All right.
We'll wait till you get back.
Do you want us to stop the recording and start it back or just?
He can't hear you.
No,
Thank you. Natanya.
Oh, this is such an exciting life we live.
Well, while he's rebooting, I think it's interesting how the spiral staircase and they're going up these cells and the cells get bigger on the way up.
And what
It
is the
sounds
purpose
to
of
me
them?
a lot like a beehive.
Well, yes, but to
Going
what extent? I mean, what's going on upstairs? There's
Right.
I don't
nothing
know
up
if
there.
this has anything to do with it, but we learned something about how the Kohanim, all the Kohanim in the world, quote unquote, they all have shifts. And I mean shifts during the year, like they come for 2 weeks, sort of like reserves in the army in Israel.
Right. Like
You come for 2
firemen,
weeks and then you go home
at
for
a
the rest of the
firehouse.
year.
Yes.
Mhm. So I was thinking that perhaps the cells were that.
Well, the one on the bottom is 4 foot, and the one right above that is 5 foot, and the one at the top is 6 foot, and then it goes into a 12-foot opening.
Are you foot or amma?
Cubits, excuse me. Well,
Because
depending
if
on,
it's for
I'm looking at the
amma,
chart. I don't know what an almond is. But,
amma is a cubit.
okay.
So if it's
Sorry about
it's
that.
2 feet and a cubic, so you've got, 12 times 2 is 24 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, these are big openings. The Cohen are going up and down them, and it's and it's in and out of the sanctuary, and then it spirals upward. So you've got a spiral staircase going upward into bigger rooms
Yes.
over the sanctuary,
Mm-hmm.
and so wow.
It could
So
be.
you've got the
what I was
Kohanim going
thinking,
up and down, almost like an electrical conduit.
or
and,
like an Escher painting.
It could be at each level there's a different thing that they do.
It could be.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, like,
I don't know what all their purposes are. So,
Well, like,
and there could be
the-
new ones when Mashiach comes and the third temple comes.
But there are like there are rooms where they do the sacrifices, where they.
Well,
I
that's
mean,
not in
this
that doesn't
this
go
was
up to the
from-
Holy of the Holies. That doesn't go up to the sanctuary. That's in the outer courts where they do the sacrifices.
Right.
We're talking
This
about
is the sanctuary.
these are going into the sanctuary.
Yeah, these cells are surrounding the sanctuary, and there's some even with the Holy of Holies, and those spiral staircases go up, and people in the Kohen can go up and down those spiral staircases. Look at it. The sanctuary has 3 openings on one side, 3 on
Well, I
the
can't
other.
look at it because I can't afford to buy that book.
Oh, well, the book shows, I wish I could send you a picture so you would know what I was talking about. But the walls, there
Well,
are
you could
3
put your-
walls.
You
There are
could
3
put your
walls.
camera on for long enough to show it to me.
Okay, hold on a second. I'll see if I
There
can
was
do
a
that.
spiral staircase, and thus by means of the spiral staircase of the lower ascending to the highest and the way of the middle staircase. Yeah, it's and then it's funny how it in the
Did
commentary.
you see it?
It looks
No.
rectangular. And I was
It's
sort of
rectangular.
visualizing a circle.
It's
So-
rectangular, and there are 3 walls of cells.
Mm-hmm. And what's on the
And-
4th wall?
And they even go all the way to the back wall. There are 2 walls. There's the Holy of Holies wall, and then there's a
Okay.
wall behind it. And these cells surround the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies.
Ah,
And so, and the rooms are bigger at the top. So I don't know how many levels it doesn't say how many levels there are. It just says there are levels.
Well,
As they
And
go
that the
towards
rooms
the
at the
top,
top
yeah.
are bigger than the rooms at the bottom.
A room with a view.
this particular part that we're speaking about has 3 levels.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. So there's 3 levels. You've got 3 floors.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Hmm.
And
And Solomon's temple had it says that Rashi describes a spiral staircase that led from cell to cell within the cells.
Mm.
He was referencing 1 Kings 6:8, which states that Solomon's temple had such staircases.
Yeah.
So this part is
After a while, I
taken
think
from
I started. After a while, I think I
Temple.
started skipping all those things about about the first temple being built because it was just a lot of building stuff. This
Maria, get out of there.
see, and it says, and we're not even to verse 8 yet, but verse 8 says that
I think there are 21 all
for
told.
the height of the building, one must turn to Midos for 6, which gives 100 cubits at the height of the sanctuary in the second temple. See, and the third temple is going to be bigger.
Mhm.
Yeah, I learned bits of what the second temple was like because I was learning Mishnah, Talmud, and we were talking about all the jobs that the Kohanim had for the services where they
You
would
want the
take
3
the
tests?
sacrificial services and stuff, and the Gemara had the
I hear you.
Oh,
Debbie,
you hear me?
Gemara had little
yes, Rabbi, we can hear you. Debbie,
can
Rabbi.
you hear us?
Mhm.
So the Gemara had little sketches of different things in the second temple.
So-
Because it was written not long after the second temple was destroyed.
Okay, Debbie, the rabbi's
Thank
back.
you. Yeah.
Was it your microphone? Oh, well, you got a microphone.
Yeah, I installed an external one.
Okay.
That looks like ours.
It says.
I gotta gotta test the distance from the microphone. Can you hear me well, or should I get closer?
Well, sounds good to me.
Good to you? Okay.
I can hear you fine. I don't know
about
how
now?
other people hear you.
What about now? Can you hear me?
Yes. Mhm.
Oh, okay, good. So it's flexible. Okay, so there was an interesting commentary in last week's chapter we didn't get around to, that it was impossible to tell exactly the exact measurements of the cells according to the prophecy. So I think there's another Millstone commentary similar to that here in this chapter. Let me try to find that one.
On 343, it has some good commentary about the cells.
Where? Which one?
On 343 in the Milstein.
Yeah,
Chapter 3?
yes, we were reading it while you were gone.
You said chapter 3?
No, page 343. Sorry.
Okay. Very good. It's nice the class continued even when I was busy. Okay, so but also, did you read the commentary from Rashi quoting the Mishnah and Midos?
I did. We did. We didn't go through every word verbatim, but we did read a little of that. Yes.
Okay, so in the previous page, 341, there's also a Rashi also quoting Midos. And at the end of the paragraph, right before the commentary to verse 6, it says, thus the cell could be no wider than 4 cubits if the overall size of the building was to remain the same. So the cubits in chapter 41 in the sanctuary were about 4 cubits in width.
That's 8 feet.
So even according to someone, so 4 cubits in width, in other words, is the average person could easily fit in that.
To what purpose?
Right. Now the question is, were there doors? Apparently there were not doors. I mean, if there were doors, so then I would say maybe it's a changing room for the Kohanim or something. But we have so many of them throughout the temple. That's a good question. We're probably gonna have to discover that together. It may be as simple as trying to add more mitzvos. For example, if every
I have a question on the floor here.
yeah, well, let me finish. Every potential doorway is a potential fulfillment of the commandment to have a mezuzah on the doorpost. So therefore, if you proliferate the doorposts in the building, so now you're compelled to have more and more scrolls of the Torah on the walls. So in a sense, it's possible that the cells were established by God to simply proliferate the mitzvah of mezuzah multiple times.
Very interesting.
Because otherwise, if it was like for modesty's sake, so there would be a doorway, so you could close the door. However, the cells near the roof, potentially they could have been for changing, since it was on the balcony. If it was a balcony, well, we discussed maybe it was more like a platform or a ledge. So if it was a balcony,
but the cells and walls don't go to the balcony.
right? Well, again, these all these illustrations do not show the internal staircases, but there were staircases.
You're right.
Right. So at least from the diagrams we've seen so far, we don't know exactly where the stairs are. But just for example, if I've been in a synagogue where the women's section balcony was like maybe like 100 feet long, deep, so if there was a closet, even without a door, along the far wall, it would be invisible to the men's section. So potentially the cells in the upper floors could be for modesty's sake, so that since the upper floors normally had a lot of the women, and women like to adjust their clothing, so they could go to a place where it's more modest and avoid any potential immoral situations occurring. Whereas the cells down below, they may just be entryways to the other parts of the temple that by putting doorposts, now you have to have more mezuzahs. That may be their only purpose. I believe the it's also translated as a cell, but the entryways to the staircases were also called in Art Scroll English cell. So therefore we're talking about 3 different types of cells just based on the Art Scroll translation. Okay, so there's the cells high above, which may not have a great it may not have a standard purpose. Actually, God gave me a different idea about that. So now let's say the women's section is by cells. Okay, now remember the upper cells are by windows leading outward of the temple. Okay, so you can see outside of the temple building from the cells on the platform way above. Okay, so now if the women's section had access to this, and in other words, there's like a parapet or gateway so that it was safe for children. So therefore, children are often interested in playing and interrupting serious moments. So a child may be prone to look out a window in the middle of prayers. This happens, during any activity. If you bring a young child to an adult activity, the young child often behaves differently. So now, if however, this is occurring in the Holy Temple, where people have been waiting thousands of years to finally honor God, and then you have this little kid turning away from the holy service, sticking out his feet and just staring outside the building. So for the child, that could be a sin, and also an embarrassment to the parents. But by having these little alcove cell things, so then the kids technically are entering an inner room to look out the window. Since they're in a separate room from the temple service, it's not a disrespect, it's not a bizayon to God's honor, if you understand. So that if a child slips away, a parent still won't be held responsible for disrespecting the temple. So in other words, these cells encourage parents to bring their children and not be afraid, oh, he's going to be too wild, we can't bring him.
So there'd be like, some of them might be like nurseries.
Yeah, again, there's not enough details
to know.
Right. We don't know, was there a parapet, so therefore this was for children or not? If it was for children, it makes sense. You need a separate cell for each window area up above, because then the kids could play there and it's not disrespectful to God's honor. And then, all these, just imagine a holy family, 50 generations waiting for the rebuilding of the temple. Then as soon as they get there, their kids are turning away from the service, government, so God planned ahead. There shouldn't be any negative connotation for kids being kids. So
we discussed while you were rebooting also the fact that because that the Kohanim would have like a 2-week service period time before their shifts would change and another group of Kohanim would come in. So maybe some of the upper cells might have been like sleeping chambers.
Well, that was by the previous temple.
Okay.
By Ezekiel's temple, there's one complication, is that all the righteous people from history will be resurrected. So therefore,
How is that a complication to service?
because therefore each family may only have one day of the year where they could.
Oh,
You see what I'm saying?
oh, I see what you're saying completely.
Right.
Okay.
So
Well,
yeah,
yes, things will be different. So
yeah. I think that's one of the cool things about studying the third temple, is that we've referenced the first and second temple to because that's what we're used to. That's what most of the models in the world about the temple are built about, the first and second temple. Many prophecies about them, but the Ezekiel's temple is different. So therefore, we always have to say, well, does that apply in this case?
Rabbi,
Yes.
in the art scroll Ezekiel, it talks about how the commentaries are unclear, but it does talk about the mezuzahs on a place to put the mezuzahs.
Very nice. Which page?
It's not series.
It's the
Tanakh
the art
series.
scroll Tanakh Ezekiel.
Yeah, that's the white edition.
Yes,
Okay, what page is that?
for page 641.
641. I'm very proud of you guys. You see, that was my hope, to not just use the Hebrew commentaries, to encourage people to be able to research it themselves. You understand?
Uh-huh.
So thank God you were able to research that even when I was busy offline. Okay, so it's page 641. Which paragraph?
See the upper cells on the. I know I saw it. Where is it? In companies, the house explains. It goes into detail about Rashi and them not knowing exactly what it's going to be, but referencing back to Solomon's temple. Oh, come on. Does not agree with the interpretation. Rashi does not agree with the interpretation. He clearly describes a spiral staircase which led from cell to cell. Within the cells, he references 1 Kings 6:8, leaving no doubt about this. Well, I can't find it. I should have marked it when I was reading it. I'm sorry.
Oh, very good. Okay, but anyway, so we know it exists. So that backs up my supposition. Thank God. But we should know exactly which, maybe only the lower ones had a mezuzah. All right, so hopefully we'll pick that up as we go through it. Very nice. Excellent. You're making your teacher proud. Okay, so remember, once you master all the Torah, be sure to pretend there's at least one area you don't know, so I can still teach you something.
Okay.
Oh my
But
goodness.
otherwise, feel free to go ahead.
absolutely, Rabbi, absolutely.
Charity starts at home. Thank you.
Mhm.
And well, hey, we're doing this from your home, technically, so, and my home and our home. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so technical difficulties made it hard for me to keep track of where we were, but I think we went through verse 7, was it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I guess we'll start with verse 8. Okay, I think though this illustration talks about the cells. Let's see, where's 410? 410. Second. 412. 4. Okay, so at least in this illustration, here, this is on page 343 of the Milstein. All right, so the cells on the lower floor is these little spaces between the two walls. See, with the little doorways, lentils. So by cell, we mean, for example, 1 mezuzah, 2 mezuzah, 3 mezuzah, 4, 5 mezuzah, 6 mezuzah. Let's go learn some more. Okay. All right.
Sounds like we're
Okay, that
jumping
one
rope.
worked. Okay. It's nice when a joke works.
Learned
Okay.
it just a little bit different, but that's still cool.
Okay, so let's go to verse 8.
Or you could say 7 mezuzah score.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes, yes, yes.
wow. Okay, it's verse 8. In the Hebrew, V'ra'isi labayas gova saviv saviv mustos hatzlaos malo hakone sheish amos atzila rochav hakir asher latzila el hachutz chamesh amos v'asher munach beis tzlaos asher labayas uvein hashalachos rochav esrim ama saviv labayas saviv saviv ufesach hatzila lamunach pesach echad derech hatzafon ופסח אחד לדרום ורוחב מקום המונח 5 אמות סביב סביב. בבניין אשר על פני הגזרה פאס דרך הים רוחב 70 אמה וקיר הבניין 5 אמות רוחב סביב סביב ואורכו 90 אמה. Okay, please translate through verse 12. 8 through 12.
I saw the height of the temple all around. The foundations of the cells were a full rod thick, a 6 cubit square. The width of the cell's wall towards the outside was 5 cubits. There was also an open space at the end of the temple's cells, between the chambers and the temple and the temple building. That's in brackets. There was a 20 cubit wide space around the temple all around. The entrance of the cell's structure was by the open space, one entrance to the north and one entrance to the south. The width of the open space was 5 cubits all around.
Yeah, did I read 12 also?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Well, I'll read it now. Just
Okay.
Babinyan asher al pnei hagizra pas derech hayam rochav 70 amo v'kir habinyan 5 amos rochav saviv varko 90 amo. Please translate 12.
The entire structure that was built alongside the main temple building was 70 cubits in width. On its western side, the outer wall of the structure was 5 cubits in width all around, and its length was 90 cubits.
Okay, so now the figure 18 on page 347 shows more of an aerial view. Okay, so now this of course is without the roof on, but this was what it looks like. So these rows here are all these interconnected cells going all the way around.
Mm.
wall, it looks like a square heart.
Well, it's interesting. I'm wondering if there's some sort of function. Was there okay. Well, again, this is what Ezekiel perceived, not necessarily what was described to him. If it was described to him, he could actually give us better details in a sense. He was just writing down what he witnessed. You understand? So he witnessed this in this size. It looked about this many, this much high, etc. But if he was told by God, it is exactly this dimension and this dimension, so that is certainly more accurate than a estimation based on just a visual
Observation.
inspection. Right. So we see the difference. You know, we described previously that Moses and Isaiah were more literal prophets, and Zechariah was a more allegorical prophet, and Ezekiel is somewhere in between. So here is an example. He was a literal prophet, but he was limited by his ability to perceive. Whereas Moses and Isaiah, in a sense, were told what is behind the wall. You understand?
Right,
So
told exactly.
Right. He had to physically inspect it in the other world. Ezekiel, you know, and then he's just describing that, which is, of course, is incredibly high prophecy. But you know, Moses is even higher still. So that's really amazing. Right. So for example, thank God we had Moses. For example, the commandment of phylacteries to tefillin would be impossible if you were just told bind these boxes to your eye to your arm and between your eyes. But what's in the box? So Moses was told what's in the box. You know, it's not written down in the written Torah. But I mean, there are certain commandments that are not written down in the Torah, so that there would be a spiritual difference between the actual people God gave the Torah to and other people who are like trying to supplant them, replacement, pretend that they're the new Israel, etc. So there is a spiritual difference between Jewish people today and other nations because of the oral Torah. If everything was spelled out, you know, if a part of the 5 books of Moses was like Mishnah, so then, you know, everybody could have just made up a different form of Judaism. What they made up was something which is definitely not Judaism. So therefore, when Mashiach comes, there doesn't have to be as many miracles for people to realize, okay, God is giving prophecy in that direction. Maybe that's the way to do it. Debbie wrote, I once heard that the oral Torah is the lecture and the written Torah is the class notes. That's an interesting way to put it. But not just the class notes, it's also like the headlines, you know what I'm saying? Like, for example, a person who doesn't know oral Torah can think of an over evaluation of the 10 commandments. There are not only 10 commandments, there are over 600 commandments in the 5 books of Moses. But 10 commandments are representative of all the categories of commandments. There are categories of respecting people, categories of respecting heaven, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And everything is commanded by God. It's really amazing that God cares about us not hurting each other. That's really beautiful.
Amen.
Mhm.
Okay, so we read through verse 12. Now let's continue in verse 13. Umadad habayis orech mea ama v'agizra v'abinyan v'kiroseha orech mea ama v'rochav penei habayis v'agizra lakadim mea ama umadad orech habinyan el penei hagizra asher al achareha v'atikeha mipo mea ama v'heichal panimi v'ulame hechatzer hasipim v'hachalonim tumos v'tikim saviv lishalashtam neged hasaf sechif eitz saviv haaretz ad hachalonos v'hachalonos mechusos al me'al hapesach v'al habayis hapenimi v'lachutz v'al kol hakir saviv hapenimi v'chitzon midos v'asui keruvim v'simora ben keruv l'cheruv shnaim panim la'keruv. Okay, please translate through verse 13 through 18.
Then he measured the temple building as 100 cubits in length. The main temple building, the cell structure, and its walls were 100 cubits in length. The width of the front of the building and the main temple building on the east was 100 cubits. He measured the length of the structure along the main temple building going towards its rear, including its corner structures on the one side and the other as 100 cubits. Now the sanctuary and the inner sanctum and the halls of the courtyard. There were doorposts, narrowing windows, and square pillars all around for all three of the areas. Opposite the doorpost was wood panels all around, as well as on the wall from the ground to the windows. The windows were partly covered to cover the doorway and until the inner sanctum and outward, and to the entire wall all around in the inner sanctum and in the outer room. The panels were of the same dimensions. The panels were engraved with cherubim and date palms, with the date palms between cherub and cherub. Each cherub had two faces.
Okay, so when we're talking about a great chamber, remember there were 4 chambers. So the two along the western wall by the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKodeshim, by the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies, are these 2 structures. See in this illustration here.
Mm-hmm.
But also there were corresponding ones on the opposite wall in the west, and in the east, excuse me. But from a frontal view, once you're in the inner courtyard, frontal view, see that? I don't know if it's easy to see that illustration there, but it is it's reminiscent to me almost of like the White House, where it's like symmetrical, tall in the middle and then tall in the ends. So, but we see that, so this is the 3 structures we just looked at: sanctuary and the 2 great halls. Then here's the main area where they do the sacrifices, altar. And then here's 2 more of the great chambers. But in the far corners is generally where the Kohanim and prepared.
So the 4 chambers are where the cherubs were carved with the dates palms.
Well,
Did I understand that correctly or incorrectly?
So we're talking about the inner sanctum.
right?
Where is the sanctum? Sanctum is the Kodesh, the sanctuary.
Well, that's not the inner courtyard. And he said chambers.
So here's the sanctuary courtyard. It was called reversibly sanctum, not just sanctuary.
Okay, so
And
that's where the
Holy.
cherubs would be carved in, on those walls.
Probably bas relief along the side. You know, that's like a picture that kind of sticks out of it from the wall, multi-dimensional.
Okay,
And then the actual ark is inside the Holy of Holies with its own actual statues of cherubim. So it's interesting in the descriptions about the building of Solomon's temple. It talks about which animals he built for the temple, which animals he built for his throne room. He had also a lion in his throne room as well. So, I mean, because we're talking about statues, statues are generally frowned upon in Torah situations, but there are exceptions to the rule, and we learn about that in the construction of the temple.
What are you talking about?
Okay, so we just read through verse 18. Okay, so now this is a different type of engraving in verse 19. Let's read 19 and 20. Ufnei Adam el ha-timora mipo ufnei chafir al ha-timora mipo. Asui al kol habayis saviv saviv. Me'aretz vad me'al ha-pesach akruvim v'hatimorim asuyim v'kir ha-hechal. Please translate 19 and 20.
There was the face of a person towards the date palm on the one side, and the face of a young lion towards the date palm on the other side. So it was engraved for the entire interior all around. The cherubim and the date palms were engraved from the ground until above the entrance, and so it was for the wall of the sanctuary.
Okay, so now this is described. Okay, well, okay, so there's commentary on verse 18 actually. I wanted to cover. 18 starts on page 349 in the Milstein, but continues on page 350. So the second paragraph there, the figures were cherubim, human bodies with two heads, one of a man and one of a lion. Palm trees alternated with the cherubim in such a way there was always one palm tree between the two cherubim. So these were not regular cherubim or like the cherubim on the ark, where you know the angelic faces of like young children. It was a two-headed human body, one of a man and one of a lion. It makes me think about the duality of people, that they could achieve spiritual greatness or they could descend to animalism. And or if they're just a simple person, they can become as powerful as a lion if God is with them. So it could remind people to be humble. It can remind people that there's hope to beyond what their current limitations may be. God is there to help, and it's very interesting. Okay, in the commentary in verse 19, since the cherubim had a man's head and a lion's head, each palm tree throughout the house had a human head facing it on one side and a lion's head on the other. So this is of the third temple, this is a consistent idea, but it's only in the sanctuary. This is like a message God is giving to the priests, the Kohanim. This is not what regular people would access. Very interesting. Let's read verses 21, 22, and 21, 22. Ahechal mezuzas ruvua ufnei hakodesh hamar kamara. Amizbech eitz shalosh amos gvoha v'arko shtaim amos umikitzo osav lo v'arko v'kirosav eitz. Vaydaber elai zeh hashalchan asher lifnei Hashem. Asher lifnei Adonai. Okay, please translate verses 21 and 22.
The sanctuary had a square doorpost, and from the entrance of the Holy of Holies, the entrance was like the appearance. The altar was of wood, 3 cubits tall, and its length was 2 cubits, including its corners. Its surface and its sides were of wood. He said to me, "This is the table that is before Hashem."
Thank God. There's a beautiful but very long commentary on Art Scroll in the Tanakh series. Maybe they also repeat. Yeah, they repeated here in the Milstein as well. On verse 22. Maybe I can codify these. The Zohar scroll asks four questions. Why is the altar called a table? Why is no other object in the sanctuary shown? Not the menorah or anything else. Why why should the altar description interrupt the discussion of the decorations? And we know of two altars. The large outer oral altar, Mizbech Olah, which stood in the courtyard, the big altar. And it was used for more sacrifices, in the smaller smaller golden altar, which was stood in the sanctuary, was mainly for daily ketoras, the incense. So, but we're discussing the we're inside the kodesh and not outside with the altar. So we must be talking about the inner incense altar. So they have four separate answers. So the first question is raised in the Talmud, Brachos 55a. The verse begins with the altar, ends with a table to teach you as long as the temple stood, the altar atoned for Israel. But now a person's table atones for him because it gives him the opportunity to practice charity by sharing his food. See Brachos 55a. So if you're teaching Torah, on a table, so then you're using that table to share Torah, like somebody who uses a table to share food. So that's another example of using a table for charity that could help atone. But remember, the main repentance is not temple service; it is simply repenting. And the main part of repenting is regretting the evil. Also, not repeating it and admitting it before God. And if there is something you have to restore, such as something was stolen, so restore that as well. But the principal part of repentance is regret of the sin. Whereas temple service is about a spiritual rectification for the trouble you brought to the world, and as centered around your personal soul's mission. So if a person leaves this world with need of much atonement, so then it causes a spiritual crisis that usually results in some sort of a afterlife punishment. But that is almost secondary compared to the idea of a person has to come to regret evil. They don't regret evil, so then they could still like, for example, people who support terrorists, if they don't regret evil, probably tomorrow they're still going to support terrorists. If in their interpersonal life they don't want to hurt people, so then they may figure out, wait, this terrorist is not somebody who is oppressed. He's killing people. Maybe I shouldn't support him. But if a person is addicted to sin or whatever, they may like be in a sleep and just be insensitive to the moral and ethical problems with supporting evil. So see that the regret of sin is the main thing. If a person simply only would offer sacrifice or like would write a check to charity for every time they sinned, so it doesn't change the fact that they're on a path to sin again. So they may end up doing a nice thing, but they're very likely to continue to do the evil. And of course, if the evil is something severe, like supporting a terrorist, so even the Holy Temple service is not a guarantee to be rectified away from evil. So this explains why God is bringing the third temple at a time when Mashiach is coming, because we need both. We need the rejection of evil that Mashiach represents, and we need the pursuit of spirituality that the temple represents. We need both. So the Art Scroll commentary to verse 22 continues extendedly, and it's a very nice commentary, but it's a bit longer than we can discuss right now. So, but highly recommended. That's Ezekiel 41, verse 22. Art Scroll, either the Tanakh series or the Milstein edition has the commentary. Okay, continuing in verse 23. Ushtaim delasos lahechal v'lakodesh. Ushtaim delasos li delasos shtaim musabos delasos shtaim ledelas achas. Ushtei delasos lacheres. Vasuya alehen el dalsos hahechal keruvim v'simorim kasher asuyim lakiros v'av eitz al pnei ha'ulam mehachutz v'chalonim atumos v'simorim mipo el kisfos ha'ulam v'tzalos habayis v'ha'ubim. Okay. All right, please translate verse 23 through the end of the chapter 26.
There were two doors to the sanctuary and to the Holy of Holies. Each set of doors had two doors, two swinging doors, two comprised one door, and two doors comprised the other. Engraved upon them, upon the doors of the sanctuary, were cherubim and date palms, just as they were engraved on the walls. There was a thick wooden beam going into the front hall, into the front wall of the hall towards the outside. There were narrowing windows and date palms on the one side and on the other on the shoulders of the wall of the hall. He also showed me the casing of the temple and the beams.
So the oral Torah is really cool because it talks about what's the possibility of interpretation and what is, through deductive reason, what must it be like. So there are two opinions mentioned. One, the initial Tana, the initial Mishnaic author, and the other by Rabbi Yehuda. They have two different opinions. How did the doors fold? So were they regular doors on a hinge, or were they double hinged doors? So I'll show you the diagram. It's on page 353 in the Art Scroll Milstein edition. It's a discussion in the Talmud. Did they just fold like regular doorways, two doors, or was it two hinge doors? So in other words, they could just fold onto themselves and all be within this area. Or did it have to use this area to swing and be hidden from view?
I wonder if there's any
Fascinating.
historical or archaeological confirmation that they even had accordion doors or folding doors.
Well, it's resolved Talmudically, so.
Is
I'm
that
sure
was a Talmudic argument?
Mhm.
Yes, which is great because again, the Talmud is written from the time of the between the end of the Second Temple era
Uh-huh.
and then for the next 400 or 500 years. It was, the Mishnah was written before the temple was destroyed. Well, was written down after the temple was destroyed, but was composed actually before it was destroyed. And so you had people who wrote the Mishnah who had actually been in the Second Temple, in the Herod Temple. So people had experience. Could this even fit? Like, I mean, just from this picture, I'm not sure there's even enough room for the doors to bend this way. Just if this is the actual scale. I mean, what's this black area here? Would that interrupt the flow of the door? Apparently not. You see what I'm saying? But it doesn't. It's not clear from the picture.
It does seem more awkward, and the less awkward one would be the accordion style door.
Yeah, the bifold. I agree.
Okay, so then when it was folded is the bottom of that illustration. See, so when it was folded, it all fit between these two sections. There's nothing in those alcove cells area. Whereas this, it would have to go flat against it. So this one folded here, this one folded here. So according to this side, you'd have to say that this black area was open floor that the door could easily fold over. Again, it's a two-dimensional depiction, so it's just not as detailed as we would need to know simply from the picture. So for this, it's good to study it inside the Talmud. Again,
You know,
this is
Rabbi, they
discussion.
built entire buildings off of two-dimensional pictures.
Yeah, but it's easier to build a two-dimensional building from a two-dimensional picture than a three-dimensional.
It may be four-dimensional.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Oh, well, that's a probability.
very good. Okay, so that again is the Talmudic tractate Midos, which is only a Mishnah. It doesn't have a Gemara. So you can check that out. Check out the Art Scroll Mishnah on Midos. All right, so I guess we'll take questions from the floor and then maybe call it an evening. We finished chapter 41. You had a question before? You said, Eliezer Yaakov?
Oh yeah, question from the floor about that. How do we do more mitzvahs? How do we assume that everything's gonna turn out right if Hashem, if things just get worse over time in the future before the end of days, over the next few terrifying impending years of doom and prophesized punishments? And how do we do more mitzvahs per se, so that we could become higher than angels, so that we could become tzaddikim of Hashem, so we can protect this world from spiritual and physical dangers?
Okay, now because the microphone I'm using here has noise cancellation, I'm not sure if you picked that up. Did you hear the question? Everyone? No? Okay.
Yes.
No.
Yes,
You did?
Yeah.
Yes, Mhm.
Oh, okay. So yeah, my son Elias Yaakov asked, so how do we pursue spirituality if in the tribulations between now and the end of days, there could be some bad things. How do we maintain, I guess, a spiritual equilibrium and continue doing mitzvahs? You know, well, we already have some practice. September 11th, and the virus, etc.,
October
and
7th.
October 7th. So we just do our best and trust God and keep at it. I remember
And remember
speak
that death is not the end.
right, but even a situation that had a bleak outcome. I remember speaking to one of my Rebbeim, Rabbi Alan Soloveitchik, shortly before he passed. So I asked him, how is he doing? And he answered the best he can under the circumstance. So thank God he wasn't complaining. His it was his wife passed away right before he passed away. So he was in mourning for his wife in addition to the deterioration of his health. And he simply said he's doing the best he can under the circumstance. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was just doing the best he could. And I think that's something everyone can emulate if God forbid something looks bleak. But
so bad for you, Abba. Your great teacher passed away.
but the thing is that God is merciful. God is merciful, right? God is merciful, and most people have survived every cataclysm in world history. Even in World War II, a majority of the world's population was not in immediate danger of destruction. So, and tech,
Even
right,
in Israel, after what just happened, people are just going about. I hear every day from my sister writes a little thing every day, what's going on with her. And she's in the south too. It's just she's closer to the Jordan, the Jordan. She's so I was very worried because it was Yom Tov. I couldn't find anything out until after Yom Tov. And because I got family, I got my sisters in the south and my brothers in Modi'in, and I got nieces and nephews and great nieces and great nephews. So I was worried, but still, despite that large number, Kenai Nahor, most of the people in Israel survived.
right, and even in the Holocaust, we're literally there's a nation trying to find every Jew in every nook and cranny and kill them. A majority of the people survived. God runs the world, not evil, and we're approaching the end of days where evil may reign. So therefore, it's going to get better and better, not worse and worse. However, until Mashiach comes or the end of days occurs, there's still a free will for evil, and evil tends to panic when it doesn't stand a chance to get its way.
Yeah.
So we just have to.
It's like what they say, Mechadle Mashiach, the labor pains of Mashiach. When
Right.
it's from what I understand, I don't know from experience, but when women have babies, it gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse, and then the baby comes out, and they decide it's all worth it.
Yeah, well,
As I said, I don't know from experience.
well, it's a process. It's going to happen. So, might as well look forward to the good times. We're already reading about
Let the good times roll.
Yeah, we're already reading about the good times, and again, as we study.
First, because the good times are rolling on. Yeah,
Okay, so then we as we study about the temple being rebuilt, we're actually contributing towards the spiritual rebuilding of the temple. So thank God, it's really good, really generous of God, and we're already participating in the future wonder of the of God's temple.
Sounds like
along
it's
the-
gonna be a gorgeous building,
Oh, yeah, definitely. And
amazingly gorgeous.
yeah, and it's fascinating that it's so huge, I'm saying it's
Yeah,
it-
Forgive me if I was cringe, Abba.
I don't understand how you can have a mizbeach, an altar out of wood. Wouldn't it get blood stains all over it?
I'm just happy that Hashem's saving us all.
well, it depends what you put on the wood. Remember
Dead
the
animals?
that was
No, no.
that was
I think that goes with the territory.
There are things you can put on the wood that
Oh,
will
you mean like
prevent it from
Bikurim
staining.
and mincha offerings, my kind of offerings.
well remember one was we're talking about stone with the shamir worm.
Okay, that's what I was saying. I thought that the mizbachot were made out of stone. The altars were made out of stone, and I all sort of imagined something like, the description of how you salt meat and the sieve and everything, and it needs to be, this has poked holes in it and stuff. And I sort of imagined a thing over the floor where they could just push everything out and it would all go down into the sewers and they would clean it up for the next animal.
Yeah, I don't know if you could really use wood for that.
Well, that's what I mean. That's why I
Right.
always visualized it as stone and
I mean,
using
theoretically,
the
perhaps for incense, excuse me,
oh,
incense,
yeah.
kataris, so you could have multiple different surfaces theoretically, but for sacrifices, stone or metal would seem to be appropriate.
Can
And
you
of
use
course,
metal?
metal is not appropriate for the temple.
Yeah, that's
Well, one thing is, Debbie, it doesn't say that it's a sacrificial table. It says that it's a table inside the sanctuary.
Okay, so remember that
but it
besides
said mizbeach. It's in Hebrew, it says mizbeach. I don't know what it said in English. But in Hebrew it says mizbeach, which means altar.
right, and in this verse in Ezekiel that we read, it said Zeh shulchan asher lifnei Hashem, shulchan, table.
Right, but
But
there was something a mizbeach ate.
right, but the regular temple table is shulchan aruch was for the showbread. It was not for
the shulchan for the
yeah,
lechem hapanim,
right, and of course you could have
the
hot bread even on wood. That's not a problem.
right.
But the
But it's all Pesachit though,
right,
isn't
and
it?
I showed you an illustration before. There were preparation tables for the sacrifices.
Mm.
Some sacrifices were whole. Some sacrifices only certain parts of the animal were offered.
Mm-hmm.
And so there had to be
Where
a
do they
preparation
burn? Do they burn the offerings on the altars or?
Yeah, the burning took place on the altar.
Okay. So, and metal is not appropriate for the temple, so it's either wood or stone.
Mhm.
Okay, that's what I sort of thought. And the building is made out of wood or stone? Or both?
Oh, the walls of the temple were made out of, well, of the third temple, it looks like it's stone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if the first temple was that. I remember heavy
I
descriptions
remember
about the
getting
cedars of
bored
Lebanon.
after a while and stopped and skipping it.
And also description of King David's palace. King David's palace was actually wooden.
Ah,
So wood was in heavy use during the time of David and Solomon. So they
mhm.
probably had a maximum use of wood as possible in Solomon's first temple. Again, the Herod second temple was bigger than Solomon's first temple.
And that's what they have at the Holy Land Museum, right?
Yeah. And but
I saw it once.
Ezra and Zerubbabel's second temple was smaller than the Solomon temple. And
I
Solomon,
remember hearing that the people who had been alive during the time of the first temple, when they went back for the second, cried because the temple was so much more beautiful before.
Yeah, and Solomon had used gold inlays on top of wood.
Mhm.
So it was beautiful, even
Cedars
if,
from Lebanon.
right. So the first temple was beautiful, even though if it was more modest than Herod's temple.
Mm.
And Herod's temple, it was beautifully, he built a temple to honor God, but he only did that after having committed bloodshed. So it was kind of in the process of his repentance. But
Yeah, I always
unfortunately, it
wondered
only
about
came,
that.
in a sense, it only came about through bloodshed. And remember, King David was barred from building the temple because he had shed blood.
'Cause yeah.
So it's like,
Was this after he killed his Hashmonai wife or before?
uh, well, it's probably after he finished the killing cycle. Yeah, so. Okay, so here's an illustration I showed you before from Rabbi Chlorfine's Messianic Temple book. So you have the priests working on the table. So,
Very good. I think James has a question.
okay, that's page 77 in Rabbi Chlorfine's book. Yes, James, your hand has been up for a while.
It's okay. That's fine. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Is there enough information, slightly on topic, slight off topic? I don't know.
Mhm.
Misbeach for B'nai Noach. The Rambam talks about it. I don't know how you feel about that, but is there enough information? Is there enough rabbinic literature for a rabbi to teach a Ben Noach to do it properly if he wanted to?
That's very interesting. Well, there's always information. So now there's certain commandments that a Ben Noach can do that it's a question, is a Jew allowed to teach? So that's a debate. There's three schools of thought. Either a Jew can teach a Ben Noach to do any mitzvah he wants to do, or a Jew cannot teach a Ben Noach any mitzvah that's only for Jews. Or a Jew can accept the Ben Noach's desire to do a mitzvah, even if the Jew is not supposed to encourage it, but he could, give supporting information, etc.
So there is very good there, but there is like some kind of book or some such that would teach how to make a proper misbeah.
No, I don't.
I don't recall that. Again, it's I mean,
Maybe
it's
someone needs to write
creating.
one.
I mean, there are maybe those who can teach that, but I'm not sure you could really take the time to write a book that most people wouldn't even purchase. You know what I'm saying? It's like if there was a larger B'nai Noach movement, I'm sure you could find an author for that.
I don't know.
But-
You never been to Texas, I guess.
Yeah.
We've
But,
done it several times here.
Well, James, you're welcome any day.
Oh, I thank you.
Can I ask you something about Malachim?
Mhm.
It's also sort of connected because of the altars.
About angels,
Not Malachim, Malachim, bet,
kings,
kings, yeah.
not kings.
In Kings 2, it's going through a list. I was just going over it today, and it was going through a list of this king and that king, and they're all the kings of Ephraim, the northern kingdom, and all the kings of the northern kingdom were all evil kings. But then there's spots where it talks about the kings of Judah, and it says, and they did as their fathers did and followed in the ways of Hashem, except, it doesn't say except, I say except that they had bamot, the altars that can be anywhere, and once the temple was built, you're not supposed to bring sacrifices on a bama. So why was it okay that they had bamot? All these kings of Judah it says there that they had bamot.
Oh, well, who said it was okay for them to have it?
Well, it says that they followed in the ways of their fathers and did what was right in the eyes of Hashem. Now, granted, they didn't say they did like their father David, which is usually a sign that it was a good king.
Right, but I mean, the way Jeremiah wrote in the Book of Kings, it sounds like he's saying this is the exception to the rule that they followed the ways of their fathers.
Oh, okay. So it's like, tisk, 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 you shouldn't have done that.
Right. Again, often we have criticism of Israel trying to be like the nations. The
Mhm.
nations could have a Bama, but it's not for Israel. Israel's supposed to
Mhm.
have
So
a
are
united,
B'nai
temple.
Noach allowed to have bummotes?
Yeah, well,
Now?
the question is, can they have it in the Holy Land? Outside of the Holy Land, any spirituality done by Gentiles, God is favorable towards. But again, as far as there's no real encouragement, there's no rabbinical movement to encourage Gentiles to start building altars. Can
They
they
might
do
be
it?
married dying too.
Now, yeah, can they do it without sin? It's possible to discuss that more outside of the Holy Land. In the Holy Land, um,
Well, we're
it's
outside of it, aren't we?
right in the Holy Land. I can imagine it would be prohibited because it would it could potentially discourage some Jews from participating in the desire to rebuild the temple because they could just go to the local Bama,
Uh-huh.
So even if it started with Gentiles, eventually some Jews might take it over.
And that
So
would be a bummer.
a big Bama.
Mhm.
As in bummer, so okay.
Yeah, that was my intent.
Yeah, I've been in New York for a while, so I figured out what you meant.
The Samaritans are doing it in the land.
The
But
Yeah, it's
Samaritans are what?
they're off skew anyway, but that's what I'm saying.
right.
I'm
Yeah, the
not
idea is
not a fan.
that with the temple, you could protect the world from cataclysm. So therefore, we can't put our personal preferences before what's better for the fate of the world. You know what I'm saying? If God is accepting prayer in a synagogue as a small temple, mikdash ma'at, so then I'll try to be satisfied with the way God accepts it. But to do something that could be considered like a reverse of spirituality, I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, I went as a kid, I went to public school. Uh,
That's
uh,
it.
uh, Becoming religious was something. I mean, thank God I was raised to be religious, but I mean, becoming religious even under external pressures. You know what I'm saying? Like time to go to synagogue, not to the Cubs game or something. So
Let me guess, you grew up in Chicago.
yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, the Cubs are to Chicago what the Mets are to New York.
Yeah, in Chicago there are the Bears and the Little Bears. So again, so we should pursue spirituality and try to do whatever God wants. And that's the amazing thing is God is flexible, and we should try to be flexible too, because if God says, I will accept this, but there could be a consequence from doing this greater mitzvah right now. So we should take God's word for it. For example, if a parent says, okay, you can eat a fruit, but don't take chocolate right now in front of your brother. He'll have a tantrum and he won't be able to eat dinner. See what I'm saying? So um sometimes you got to change what you're doing. I mean, you can still have your snack, but you can't do certain things at certain times.
You have
Otherwise,
to
it
do
it
what's
could
preferable for the long run.
right. So the parent understands, and certainly God understands what's needed. So if God says do something a certain way, even if it's not as ideal, even if it is not as uh like is you don't have the same awesomeness factor that you're doing what the prophets did, nevertheless, if this is what we do until the temple's rebuilt, so accepting that is part of the process. Remember, the Medrash Shmuel explains that Israel has to accept three things that they rejected for Mashiach to come. They have to accept the idea of having a temple rebuilt. They have to accept the Malchus Shemaim, kingship of heaven, and they have to accept the Malchus Space David, the kingship of Davidic dynasty.
Well, they had a whole nation basically that wasn't accepting it.
Right, and we see, if even one of these three factors is missing, if a person doesn't accept God, so then everything else is just a secular expression, an echo of what was. It's not the spirituality. If a person doesn't accept the temple, so then how many prophecies are they ignoring? How many chapters of prophecies are they ignoring in the same moment? And if they don't accept the Davidic kings, so then, well, we have a case study. That's what happened with the Hashmonaim, the Maccabees.
Right. Oh, that's right.
They had 100 years of independence, but the family of the Maccabees was wiped out as a punishment because they would
And you're
refuse to
not
let the King
supposed to
David's
have a
family.
Kohen be a king anyway.
Right.
They have a job of of being a Kohen.
Yeah, but I mean, we see so many times God talks about being fruitful and multiply. Not just the Jewish people. God also said it to Adam. God also said
Right.
it to Noach. So therefore, God is really into that, and for him to take the family that had saved Israel 100 years before and wipe them out because of what they did against King David's
Or
family.
allow them to be wiped out.
Yeah, so
Well, yeah.
I mean that's a profound and an important lesson.
Hmm.
So therefore, we need all three of those.
Right.
Medrash Shmuel.
Does it have to be every single solitary person has to accept every single of every one of those three things?
No, it's more at the national level. So therefore, for example,
50%, 51%, sort of.
right. I mean, just theoretically, if the Knesset publicly requested God send a prophet or something like that,
Mhm.
so that's an example of a game-changing event.
Mhm.
So if the will of the people is according to God's will, so then there's no more barriers. I mean, just look at the Exodus from Egypt. How many miracles upon miracles upon miracles were done?
Uh-huh.
Further, the Medrash says that just like the first redemption will be the last redemption. So Mashiach's time redemption. So therefore, Mashiach's
We're
time
gonna have
redemption.
frogs?
Maybe not frogs,
Maybe not 10 plagues.
but actually, there's a medrash that says the plague of hail will come back to against the enemies of Israel. But
Oh, I'd
yeah,
love to see that happening to the Ayatollahs and the mullahs.
yeah. Again, as we spoke about before, the hail, barad, it was supernatural because it's not like an ice
Fire
meter
and ice.
that heats up on the outside. It was like a piece of heat that was surrounded with ice.
Yeah.
As if, for example, there was a volcanic eruption years ago. It froze in the stratosphere, and then it came falling down when in the time of Moses,
melted
with the
the-
heat still within it.
Which melted the ice that was around the fire.
Right. So now, it would be interesting if there was actually like a volcanic eruption right before that the storm of hail, so that it was more, because God is as much as the miracles were revealed in Egypt, God is humble and he always is his nature to hide a miracle behind some natural occurrence.
Now, I heard once upon a time that the mitzvah in the Aseret HaDibrot, the commandment in the 10 sayings, which isn't really commandments, So anyway, I heard that the one that says you shouldn't use God's name in vain, that means don't do evil in God's name. And it would seem to me that all these Islamist, people who are so holy in their own belief system, would be violating that commandment because they're saying in the name of Allah, blah 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 blah.
Right. Well, it says explicitly in elsewhere that lo sachalu Hashem kachi, do not
And
denigrate my holy name. So therefore, obviously somebody who makes religious people look like bad is not good.
look like crazy people.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for coming, Robbie. Did you want to say anything before you leave, or you gotta go? All right.
I gotta go. Thank you,
Thank-
Rabbi.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much.
Thanks for answering all my additional questions.
Oh, it's good stuff.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Rabbi, it's a
Thanks,
good
everyone.
class.
Thank you, Rabbi Friedlander.
Yeah.
Thank
It
God.
was a great
God.
class. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Please come again.
Yeah.